There was a time in this country when a soldier's voice meant something, when the men and women in uniform were the backbone of every small town, when families would line up at the post office just hoping for a letter from overseas, when one phone call home could light up a mother's face for an entire year. But somewhere along the way, we got too busy. We stopped answering the phone. We stopped writing letters. We stopped remembering. But what happened on that Wednesday afternoon in the Family Feud studio would remind every person in that room, and millions more watching at home, that some voices are worth stopping everything for. Some voices carry more weight than 1,000 speeches. And some voices, when you hear them at the right moment, can bring a grown man to his knees. Steve Harvey had hosted thousands of Family Feud episodes over the years. He had laughed with families. He had cried with families. He had seen every kind of contestant you could imagine. Nothing really surprised him anymore. Nothing really stopped him, until the moment a young woman standing at the Fast Money podium asked if she could make a phone call instead of giving her final answer. Steve looked at her. He thought it was a joke, but she was not laughing. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were filled with tears she refused to let fall. And in a small voice, she asked Steve if he would please let her call one person before the final question was answered. Just one person, just for a moment. Steve, being the man he is, said yes. He did not know what was coming. Nobody did. But the second that call connected, the second that voice came through the studio speakers, Steve Harvey stopped the entire show. He turned his back to the cameras. He covered his face with both hands. And 200 people in that audience watched their host break down in a way that had never happened in the history of the show. Before we get into this incredible story that will absolutely restore your faith in what really matters in this life, please do me one small favor right now. Hit that like button below. Smash that subscribe bell. Because stories like the one you are about to hear are exactly why we do what we do. Trust me, you are going to want to stay until the very end of this one. I promise you this is not a story you will forget. To understand why that phone call made Steve Harvey stop the show, you first need to understand the woman who asked for it. Her name was Rebecca Lawson. She was 32 years old, a nurse, a mother of 2 little girls, and the wife of a United States Marine who had been deployed overseas for the last 14 months. Rebecca lived in a small town in rural Tennessee. The kind of town where everybody knows your name. Where the church bells ring every Sunday morning. Where people still wave at each other from their front porches. She worked the night shift at the county hospital, taking care of sick patients from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. Then she would drive home, kiss her sleeping daughters on their foreheads, catch 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and get up to start the whole thing all over again. Her husband's name was Captain Michael Lawson, but everybody who loved him just called him Mike. Mike was the kind of man this country used to be full of. Quiet, strong, a man of few words but a heart the size of Texas. He had joined the Marines right out of high school. He had served 3 tours overseas, and every single time he came home, the first thing he did was drop his bag at the front door, sweep Rebecca into his arms, and kiss her like it was the first time all over again. Rebecca and Mike had been high school sweethearts. They had met at a Friday night football game when they were both 15 years old. He was the quiet kid who played defense. She was the girl who sat in the bleachers with her best friends, pretending not to notice him, but she noticed. Oh, she noticed. And when Mike finally worked up the courage to ask her out after 3 weeks of staring, she said yes before he could even finish the sentence. They got married 2 weeks after graduation. They had nothing but love and a used pickup truck. And yet, to hear Rebecca tell it, those were the happiest years of her life, sleeping on the floor of their first apartment because they could not afford a bed, eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner because there was nothing else in the fridge, laughing until their stomachs hurt at jokes that were not even funny. That was their beginning. Then came the girls. Little Ellie, who was 7 now, with her father's eyes and her mother's stubborn streak. And baby Grace, who was 4, with the biggest smile you have ever seen on a little person. Mike had missed so much of their lives. He had missed Ellie's first steps. He had missed Grace being born. He had missed birthdays and Christmases and the million little moments that make up a family. But every night from wherever he was in the world, Mike would find a way to call home, just for 5 minutes, just to tell his girls he loved them, just to hear his wife's voice before he had to go back out again. But for the last 4 months, those phone calls had stopped. Mike's unit had been sent somewhere the family could not know about, somewhere the phones did not work, somewhere Rebecca could only pray that her husband was still alive. She had not heard his voice in 117 days. She had been counting, every single day, crossing them off on a calendar hanging on the refrigerator right next to the drawings her girls made for their daddy. Money had gotten tight. Mike's pay helped, but with 2 little ones, a house payment, and medical bills from when Grace had to have her tonsils out last year, Rebecca was barely keeping her head above water. She had started selling her grandmother's jewelry piece by piece just to cover groceries. She had stopped buying herself new clothes. She had cut her own hair in the bathroom mirror because a haircut cost $30, and $30 could feed her girls for a week. When Family Feud called and asked if her family wanted to come on the show, Rebecca had almost said no. She was too tired, she was too sad, she was too scared about Mike. But her sister Hannah had begged her. Hannah said this was a chance, a real chance, to win some money, to do something fun for the girls, to maybe, just for a moment, feel something other than worry. So Rebecca said yes. She packed up her sister, her brother, her father, and her cousin. And they all flew out to Los Angeles for the taping. Rebecca had told her husband about it in a letter before he left for his last deployment. She had written, half as a joke, "If I ever make it onto Family Feud, I'm going to win enough money to take you on a real honeymoon." They had never had a honeymoon. They had gotten married on a Saturday, and Mike had to report for duty on Monday. That was their marriage in a nutshell. Love squeezed in between deployments. Nobody on that stage, including Rebecca herself, had any idea what was about to happen. Nobody knew that a producer backstage had been on the phone for the last 2 hours with a man she had never met. Nobody knew that a miracle had been quietly arranged behind the scenes. And nobody knew that when Rebecca asked Steve Harvey if she could make one phone call, that one phone call was going to change absolutely everything. The game started off rough. Rebecca was nervous. You could see it in her hands. She kept wiping them on her jeans. Her smile was there, but it did not reach her eyes. Steve picked up on it right away. He has been doing this long enough to read people like a book. He knew something was heavy on this young woman's heart. In the first round, Rebecca got a question about things you might find in a school lunchbox. She froze. She just stood there. Her mind went completely blank. The other family buzzed in and stole the points. Rebecca looked like she wanted to cry right there on the stage. Her sister Hannah grabbed her hand and squeezed it tight. "You got this, Becca," Hannah whispered. "Breathe, just breathe." Steve came over to her during the transition. He did not make a joke. He did not tease her. He just looked at her with those kind eyes of his and said, "Honey, you okay?" Rebecca nodded too quickly, the way people do when they are not okay at all. Steve did not push. He just patted her shoulder and walked back to his mark. But he kept an eye on her the whole rest of the round. The second round was better. Rebecca's brother Jake came through with a big answer. The Lawson family pulled ahead. You could see Rebecca start to relax just a little bit. She laughed at one of Steve's jokes. For a second, just a second, she looked like a regular woman playing a regular game show. But then the third round came, and that is when the cracks started to show. Steve asked a question. Name something a husband might miss when he is away from home for a long time. The answers were obvious. Home cooking, his own bed, his wife. The family got all of them, but when Steve read back the final answer on the board, it was his children's voices. And Rebecca went completely still. She tried to keep smiling, she tried to keep playing, but something in her had snapped. She stepped away from the podium for just a moment. She put her hand over her mouth, and the tears she had been holding back for 117 days started to come. Quietly at first, then not so quietly. Steve stopped the game. He walked over to her. He did not ask what was wrong. He just stood there, a big, warm, quiet presence. He waited. Rebecca finally looked up at him. Her makeup was running. She did not care. "I am sorry, Mr. Harvey," she whispered. "I am so sorry. I am trying so hard. My husband is a Marine. He is overseas right now, and I have not heard his voice in 4 months, and that question just got me. I am sorry." You could have heard a pin drop in that studio. 200 people went silent all at once. Steve's eyes immediately filled up with tears. He has a soft spot for military families. Everybody who knows him knows that. His own father had served. He has spent years of his life visiting veterans' hospitals and raising money for military charities. This hit him right in the chest. He pulled Rebecca into a hug, right there in the middle of the taping. No cameras, no lights, no game show. Just a host holding a scared wife who was doing her best to hold herself together. "Sweetheart," Steve said, his voice low and rough, "you do not have to apologize for a single thing. You hear me? Not a single thing. You are doing more than most people could ever imagine. You are raising babies. You are working. You are waiting. That man of yours, wherever he is right now, he is the luckiest man in the world. And I want you to know something. We are going to finish this game. We are going to have some fun. And you are going to win some money for your girls, okay?" Rebecca nodded. She wiped her face. She took a deep, shaky breath, and she stepped back up to the podium. The audience gave her a standing ovation, not because she had done anything spectacular yet, but because sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is just keep showing up when everything inside them is breaking. The rest of the main game flew by. The Lawson family pulled it out. They won. And when the final buzzer sounded, Rebecca was chosen to go to Fast Money along with her sister Hannah. $20,000 was on the line. Hannah went first. She scored 138 points. That meant Rebecca needed 62 points to win the full prize. Rebecca stepped up to the podium. The whole studio went quiet. You could feel the audience rooting for her, praying for her. Every mother in that room was feeling every bit of what this young woman was going through. Every father was thinking about his own daughters. Every veteran was remembering what it felt like to be far from home. This was bigger than a game show now. This was a moment. Steve put the 20 seconds on the clock. Here we go, Rebecca. Name a holiday that families celebrate together. Christmas. Name something people do at the beach. Swim. Name something you might forget to pack for a trip. Toothbrush. How old is a person when they get their first real job? 18. Name something a wife tells her husband when he comes home from work. Rebecca froze. The seconds were ticking down. 8, 7, 6. Her whole face crumpled. She looked at the camera. She looked at Steve. And through tears, she whispered, "I missed you." The buzzer went off. Steve came over to her. He started going through the answers one by one. Christmas, number 1 answer. Swim, number 1 answer. Toothbrush, number 3. 18, number 2. Rebecca was doing the math in her head. She was close. Was so close. The last answer was going to make or break the whole thing, and that is when it happened. Before Steve could reveal the last score, Rebecca held up her hand. "Mr. Harvey," she said. Her voice was steady now. "Mr. Harvey, I know this is not how the show works. I know this is not allowed, but I have to ask you something, and please say yes." Steve looked at her. "What is it, honey?" "Before you read that last answer," Rebecca said, "can I please make a phone call, just one? Just for a minute. I know it sounds crazy, but I need to call my girls. If I win, I want them to hear it. And if I lose, I want to hear their voices anyway. Please, just one call." Steve thought about it for about 2 seconds, then he nodded. "Go ahead, baby, take your time. The show can wait." A producer rushed over with a phone. She handed it to Rebecca. Rebecca dialed her home number with shaking fingers. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Somebody picked up. But it was not her mother-in-law who was supposed to be watching the girls. It was not Ellie. It was not Grace. It was a man's voice. A man's voice Rebecca had not heard in 117 days. A man's voice she had not expected to hear for another 6 months at least. The voice said 2 simple words. "Hey, baby." Rebecca dropped the phone. The phone hit the floor with a sharp crack. Rebecca's knees buckled. Her sister Hannah caught her right before she fell. The whole studio was frozen. Nobody knew what had just happened. Nobody knew whose voice that was. Everybody just knew somehow that this was no ordinary moment. Steve picked up the phone. He held it to his own ear. And he heard the same voice Rebecca had heard. A quiet, gentle man's voice on the other end of the line saying, "Is she okay? Did I scare her? Becca, baby, can you hear me?" Steve's eyes welled up all over again. He put the phone on speaker. The voice filled the entire studio through the overhead sound system. "Becca," the voice said, "it is me, it is Mike. I am okay. I am home, baby, I am home." Rebecca collapsed into her sister's arms. She was sobbing so hard she could not breathe. The audience exploded. Strangers were hugging strangers. Grown men were wiping their eyes. Steve turned his back to the cameras for a moment. He put both hands over his face. He needed a second, just a second, because this man had seen a lot in his life. But there are moments that get past every guard you have ever built. And this was one of them. Steve stopped the show. He turned to the production crew and told them to kill the game, stop taping, stop everything. The producers looked at each other. They nodded. The cameras stayed rolling, but the game was done. Whatever happened next was not going to be a game. It was going to be history. Steve knelt down next to Rebecca. He spoke softly. "Baby, tell me what is happening. Tell me who that is." Rebecca, through her tears, could barely get the words out. "It is my husband. It is Mike. He has been overseas. He was supposed to be gone for another 6 months. I do not understand. How is he home? How is he at our house? How?" A producer walked onto the stage. Her name was Linda. She had been with Family Feud for 20 years, and she was crying too. She held a small piece of paper in her hand. She looked at Steve. She looked at Rebecca, and she said, "Steve, maybe I should explain." Steve nodded. Linda stepped to the middle of the stage. She took a deep breath. And she told the whole story. 2 weeks ago, when Rebecca's application for Family Feud had come through, Linda had read the notes. She had seen that Rebecca was married to a deployed Marine. She had seen how long he had been gone. Linda had a son in the Army herself. Her son was overseas right now too, so she understood. She understood in her bones. Linda had picked up the phone. She had called every contact she had in the military. She had spent 2 weeks making calls, talking to officers, writing emails, pulling every string she had. And 3 days ago, she had gotten the call back. Captain Michael Lawson's tour was being ended early. He was being flown home. His commanding officer had approved special leave because of a little show on American television, because of a woman at that show who had decided to do the right thing. Linda had flown Mike from his military base straight to Rebecca's house that very morning. She had coordinated with Rebecca's mother-in-law to hide him there. She had arranged for Rebecca's girls to be with him, and she had been holding her breath all afternoon, hoping, praying that Rebecca would somehow find a reason to call home during the taping. But Rebecca had done something Linda could never have planned for. Rebecca had asked to make the call herself. The audience was on its feet. People were applauding so hard their hands hurt. Rebecca was staring at Linda like she was looking at an angel, because in that moment to Rebecca, Linda was exactly that. "I do not know how to thank you," Rebecca whispered. "There are not words." Linda just smiled through her own tears. "Honey, you do not need to thank me. My boy is over there right now. I did this for him too. I did this for every family who has somebody over there. You just make sure you hug that man extra tight when you see him." Steve picked the phone up again. He spoke directly to Mike. "Captain Lawson," Steve said, his voice thick with emotion. "Sir, it is an honor to speak to you. I want you to know your wife has been nothing short of incredible. She is the strongest woman I have ever met on this stage. And I want you to know something else. She won tonight. I do not even need to read the last score. She won the full $20,000. That is hers. And I am adding another $20,000 to it right now, because this family deserves every single penny." Mike's voice came back rough and soft all at once. "Mr. Harvey, thank you. Thank you, sir. I do not know what to say, but my wife, my girls, Steve, could you please put my wife back on the phone?" Steve handed the phone to Rebecca. The whole studio went quiet again. Rebecca held the phone to her ear with both hands like it was the most precious thing in the world, and she listened. Whatever Mike said to her in that moment, the microphones did not pick up. It was just for her, but everybody could see her face, her eyes closed, her mouth trembling. Then a small, broken smile breaking through the tears. Whatever he said to his wife, it was what she had been waiting 14 months to hear. When she hung up, she looked at Steve, she looked at the audience, she looked at Linda, and she said 5 words that would be replayed on every news channel in the country the next day. "Thank you for my husband." Steve could not even respond. He just pulled her into another hug and let her cry. The audience rose to their feet one more time. And the applause lasted for almost 4 full minutes. Nobody wanted the moment to end. Nobody wanted to go back to normal life, because what they had just witnessed was not normal. It was something rare, something sacred, something we do not get to see very often in this world anymore. The episode aired 9 days later. Within 48 hours, the clip of Rebecca hearing her husband's voice had over 60 million views online. News stations across the country were playing it on the evening news. Morning shows wanted interviews. Magazines wanted photo shoots. Rebecca and Mike, being the quiet people they are, said no to almost all of it. They just wanted to go home. They just wanted to be a family again. But one thing Rebecca did say yes to was going back on Family Feud, not to play, not to compete. She went back to tell her story, and to introduce the world to the woman who had made it all possible. Linda, the producer who had spent 2 weeks making phone calls for a family she had never met. When Steve brought Linda out on stage during that follow-up episode, the audience gave her a 3-minute standing ovation. Linda was embarrassed. She kept shaking her head. She said she was just doing her job, but Steve would not let her say that. Steve took her by the shoulders. He looked her in the eye, and he said, "Linda, you were not doing your job. You were being a good human being." And in this world, that is something a whole lot rarer than it should be. Mike came out on stage next. He was in full uniform, tall, strong, a little thinner than when he had deployed. But his eyes, as soon as he saw Rebecca, lit up the way they had when they were 15 years old at that football game. He walked over to his wife. He took her hand, and together they walked over to Linda. Mike dropped to one knee. He took off the small military pin from his chest, and he placed it in Linda's hand. He stood back up. He gave her a perfect military salute. He held it for a long moment, and when he dropped his hand, he said simply, "Ma'am, you brought me home. I will never forget that. My family will never forget that. And anything you ever need for the rest of your life, you just call me. You have my word." Linda was crying too hard to speak. She just hugged him. And the audience, once again, was a mess of tears and cheers and strangers holding strangers. The impact of that moment went far beyond one family. Rebecca and Mike used the money they had won on Family Feud to do something nobody expected. They started a small foundation. They called it the Waiting Family Fund. Its purpose was simple: to help other military spouses who were struggling financially while their loved ones were deployed. Groceries, gas money, medical bills. Little things that add up to big things when you are trying to hold a family together alone. In its first year, the Waiting Family Fund helped over 800 military families across the country. By year 2, that number had doubled. By year 3, they had helped over 3,000 families. Rebecca left her nursing job to run the foundation full-time. Mike, after finishing his last tour, came home for good. He now works with the foundation, too. They travel the country. They meet military spouses. They listen, they help. And every single time somebody thanks them, Rebecca just smiles and says, "A nice woman named Linda taught me how to pay it forward. We are just doing what she did." Linda kept working at Family Feud for 3 more years before she retired. Her son came home safely from his deployment. He is now married with a little boy of his own. Linda is a grandmother. She babysits that little boy every Tuesday while her son and daughter-in-law go out on a date night. She still keeps the pin Mike gave her in a small box on her dresser. She takes it out sometimes on hard days and looks at it. She says it reminds her that kindness is never wasted, not ever. Steve Harvey kept a framed photo of Rebecca and Mike hugging on the stage in his office. He has it sitting right next to photos of his own family. People who visit him ask about it all the time. And every time he tells the whole story, he says it is one of the proudest moments of his career. Not because of anything he did, but because he got to witness it. He got to be there. And sometimes Steve says that is the greatest gift television can give you. A front row seat to the moments that actually matter. Little Ellie and Grace Lawson are growing up fast. Ellie is now 10 years old. Grace is 7. They both know the story of the day Daddy came home. They have watched the video on YouTube probably 100 times. Ellie says when she grows up, she wants to be a producer at Family Feud. Just like Miss Linda, she wants to help bring families back together too. Grace says she just wants to be a Marine like her daddy. Mike and Rebecca finally took that honeymoon almost 12 years after they got married. They went to a little beach town in Florida. They did nothing fancy. They walked on the beach. They held hands. They watched the sunset. Rebecca told a reporter later that it was worth the wait, every single day of the wait. Because the man standing next to her on that beach was the same man she had fallen in love with at 15. The same man who had kept coming home to her over and over from places she could not even pronounce. The same man who had taught her that love is not about grand gestures. Love is about showing up, again, and again, and again. That is the legacy of a single phone call, one producer who decided to care, one wife who was brave enough to ask for one more minute. One husband who kept coming home, and a host who was wise enough to stop the show when the show needed to stop. We live in a loud world, a busy world, a world full of noise and hurry and distraction. But every now and then somebody's voice comes through the speaker, and the whole world goes quiet, because some voices are worth stopping everything for. Some voices carry the weight of every mile that has been waited, every prayer that has been prayed. Every night spent staring at the ceiling hoping for a phone call that might never come. Rebecca Lawson heard her husband's voice on that stage, and the world heard something too. The world heard what love sounds like when it finally comes home. If this story moved you the way it moved me, please do me a favor right now. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already. And share this video with somebody in your life who needs a reminder that kindness is still alive in this country. Because it is walking around in the form of producers named Linda, and nurses named Rebecca, and Marines named Mike, and it is waiting, just waiting, for the rest of us to notice it. Thank you for watching, and God bless every family out there still waiting for a phone call home.